Though the story sounds fake, it's actually true. While Charles Holden was on his way home from work, he stopped at a fast food place close to his Harrington, Delaware home. Charles quickly ate something and then left the store and got back in his truck. He started it up and was about to leave the parking lot when he stopped. He saw a man running towards him and waving to get his attention. Charles put his truck back in park and rolled down his window to see what the stranger wanted. When the man got close enough, he told Charles that his sister was going to give birth and that he needed a ride to the 20-minute hospital. Charles wasn't sure if this person was telling the truth. It was really late. He felt bad about this guy even though he didn't know him. He told him, "No, I'm sorry, it's too late now, I have to go home." "It's not close enough." The man looked sad right away, turned around and began to walk away. Charles felt bad as he saw him leave and said, "You know what, please come back, I'll drive you some of the way." The stranger smiled, hopped into the passenger seat, and they were off. That's as far as Charles was going to take him. He drove him about 3 miles in the direction he asked to go, then stopped on the side of the road and told him, "I didn't want Charles to drive too far from home so late at night. His house was only a block away." The man got angry when he heard he would be freed so soon, though. He looked around in his pocket like he was going to find a knife or another tool. He yelled at Charles, "Give me your wallet and keys or I'll kill you." Charles, on the other hand, felt uncomfortable just being in the car with this person because he didn't trust them. Right away, he jumped into action. He jumped out of his truck, turned off the engine, and ripped the keys out of the box. From far away, Charles saw a convenience shop. He set out to get help. The stranger had also jumped out of the car and was now running up to him with a screwdriver in his hand. He turned around as he was running. This person was moving very quickly. He was getting close to Charles. At this point, Charles knew he wasn't going to get to the store before this guy caught up with him. Charles stopped at some point. His hands went up as he turned around and said, okay, I'll take you wherever you want to go after that. You can have my wallet and keys. You can have anything you want." The man then ran up to Charles, stopped, and smiled because he was happy with how things turned out. He poked him with the screwdriver and told him to return to the truck. So Charles walked back to the truck while someone else followed him and poked him in the back with a screwdriver from time to time. As soon as they got to the car, the stranger told Charles to get in and wait. As soon as Charles sat down, he started his truck and drove off faster than the man could get into the passenger side door. At some point, he saw the stranger stop, turn around, and walk away. Charles was so happy that he had avoided this terrible situation. After giving some thought to calling the police, he chose not to because it was his choice to let the stranger into his car in the middle of the night. Charles wasn't sure where he had left the new person. And because it wasn't far from his house, he was afraid that the guy would be able to recognize the truck and follow him home if he turned around and went back. There are lots of things that could happen. Charles chose to stay outside of town and drive around for a while to make sure the stranger would be long gone by the time he got back. Charles did that for about an hour and then went back to Harrington, Delaware. When he turned onto his street, he was shocked to see the person who had just tried to kill him walking down the street in front of him. The stranger didn't hear or see Charles pull onto a street, though. So Charles put it in reverse right away and drove off. Charles chose to call the police at this point because he didn't know if the stranger knew him and was waiting for him on his property as a target. He called 911. He called the police and told them what had happened earlier and that the person was now hanging out on his land. His caller told him that a cop would be sent to help him. After a short time, a cop showed up at the payphone where Charles was and told him they would take him back to his property. They would catch this stranger if he was still in the area. The stranger was long gone by the time they got there, and Charles went home. There were no signs of someone breaking in. There were no signs of anyone on or near his land. Charles then thanked the police officer. He felt better. But before the cop left, he asked him if he could quickly check over his mother's things. She lived behind Charles on the other side of some trees. He told the police officer that her name was Dorothy. She lived by herself and was 70 years old. He only cared that nothing bad happened to her. It was fine with the cop. "I'm going to check on her." So the police officer left Charles and crossed his yard, going through those trees and into Dorothy's yard. He could see right away that the back door's window had been broken and that the door itself was slightly open. The police cop pulled out their gun, went up and went inside the house. They yelled inside for Dorothy and looked, but there was no answer. Inside the house, it was very dark. There was no sound at all. They looked on the first floor but couldn't find anything, so they went up the stairs. They saw blood at the top of the stairs. They followed this blood trail into a bedroom and found a woman lying on a bed. It was Dorothy. She had been killed by a knife. The stranger, whose name was Gilbert Cannon, started looking for a place to sleep after Charles left him and drove off without him. He finally chose Charles's mother's house, which was a happy coincidence. Gilbert broke in through the back door and saw Dorothy come down the steps to talk to him. He hit her with a screwdriver because he was afraid she would be able to figure out who he was. Gilbert would later tell the cops that the attack on Charles had nothing to do with him. He was at a fast food place and saw Charles get into his truck. He thought to himself, "I bet I can rob that guy if I can get in that guy's truck the next night." Gilbert was looking for a place to sleep when he broke into a house and killed a woman who came down the stairs. The robbery had failed. Dorothy was the mother of Charles, but he didn't know that. Everything that happened that night was a terrible accident. Gilbert would say that he killed the person and be given a life term without the chance of parole.